Hello, everyone. Welcome to Perimenopausal Athletes and Beyond. And here we are all coming together with a number of beautiful speakers on a variety of topics. And I am so thrilled to bring you Dr. Morgan Button. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it did take me a little bit to get you, I have to admit. So let's be honest.
My apologies.
I really wanted to bring you forward in the spring series that we did, but I get to you at the perfect time, which is right now here in the fall masterclass series. So, and the reason why I was so drawn to what you do is because of your story. And you were a collegiate athlete. And at 19 years of age, you were in total, well, you can say it better than I, but things were not going really well for you. Let's just be honest. That's what I read. Things were not going well. And from then, you've been on a real journey into where you are today. So can you just share a little bit about that journey to where you are today and as a functional and practicing functional medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to say thank you again for having me. It's a blessing to be here.
So glad.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So I played D1 college softball, and by the middle of that season, I just had ultimate body breakdown. Now, it wasn't just something that was caused by playing sports. It really started in my infancy. So by the time I was 3 years old, I had been on 15 rounds of antibiotics. And as many of you may know, that is a very precious time for our body to really develop our immune system, and which is mostly in our gut. So those antibiotics I was on consistently for the first 3 years of my life were just really destroying my immune system, destroying my gut, and sent me into primary school with chronic constipation. Like, I was taking oral castor oil before lunch every day at the school nurse, and just doctor after doctor. I just felt like I was always in the doctor's office as a kid with some issue, whether it was ear infections, headaches as a small child, pretty chronic headaches. And then puberty came, and I had pretty much head to toe acne and cystic acne. And of course I was put on 2 rounds of Accutane, and it still didn't do much. And so it was just one thing after another. My cycles were horrible. And so then by the time I was 19, I was stacked on half a dozen medications just to deal with one symptom, but then gave me other symptoms. And then I just remember one night lying in bed, we got a call to go put the tarp on the field. It was going to rain, and I just couldn't go back to sleep. My heart was racing. And I was just like, something is wrong inside my body. And I knew it. And I felt geriatric. I felt, the just deep crepitus in my joints and just tension in my muscles. I was like, this isn't how a 19-year-old should feel. I was looking at my teammates, who were eating worse than I was. I was pretty aware of nutrition at that point, and I was trying to eat as clean as possible for a college kid and what we were being dealt with, or what we were being dealt as far as team meals goes. But I just saw them having a much easier time, and it didn't add up. So I knew something had to change. And, I looked to my grandmother, who she's now 89. And she's married to someone who is the polar opposite of her, who, never dealt with his emotions, never really exercised, overate processed foods, overdrank, really didn't nourish his body. And then here she is living in the same household, who, worked on herself, constantly educating herself, constantly learning about how to be healthier and really live and embody that lifestyle. And she's going to outlive us all. And she was such a source of inspiration at that time. And she told me, she's like, you just have to start doing your own research, because you're not going to get it from your doctor. And I took that to heart, and I stopped playing softball because my body just could not handle it at that time. I transferred schools. I changed my major to biology, thinking I was going to go into medical school. And I started seeing a chiropractor who was a female, and that was really the first female doctor I ever had. And she was like, no, there's a whole other field that actually looks at the whole patient as to, nutrition and emotion and the way your body is moving. and how you can actually be healthy and not just deal with symptoms one at a time. So I again changed my major to nutrition and then went to chiropractic school and began the study of functional wellness. And now, I mean, I've had my fair share of health trials since then.
Yeah.
But now I'm completely free of the pharmacy and I feel younger than I did at 19. And I really did this all with nutrition and prioritizing sleep and my blood sugar and stress management and really making sure that I'm not taking the things on in my life to appease others. And I think that was really the biggest piece for me, was like really doing things that are true to me and that are going to make me feel lighter emotionally than what I thought people wanted from me. So functional medicine is really this whole comprehensive look at our lives and not just the physical nature of our body, but really how we're conducting our day-to-day life.
I just want to pause for a second and just I mean, thank you for sharing your story, because I think it's so powerful in a number of ways. One is that you at the such a critical time, and we're talking to women in perimenopause or just before it hits, so age of 35 plus. If you haven't hit perimenopause, this is still so relevant, like at the critical time of youth. And well, since you're like before 3, like I just can't, it just breaks my heart having children. And that you were able to turn something around to find health, and that it's never too late. And that the idea of that the body can heal and heal itself is really powerful. So to take that on. So that was one point that I just kind of really want to bring forward. And the second is that you just said, and I might have to get you to say it again, is that you had to really prioritize what the way that your path forward. And I just want to say the things that you're doing in the world and the message you're bringing out to the world is only possible because you prioritized yourself. And we, as women, as female athletes, we so often don't want to prioritize. We want to first serve everyone else, and then we prioritize, but you don't get to do the work you're going to do in the world without taking care of yourself. So I think that this is like, it just really like hits down. We have a lot of things to talk about, but it really hits down on this idea of how do we move forward from where we are. And this is a nice segue into symptoms. So something you say on your website is, here we have, our body has all of these warning signs. And you talk about, migraines, fatigue, acne, menstrual cycle, like mood things, eczema, dry, brittle hair, skin, nails, weight gain, it goes on, right? And that you say, just because they're common doesn't mean they're normal. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of our menstrual cycle and, reproductive age, and then into the perimenopause and postmenopause idea of how do we see that kind of line of what's okay or what's like normal, quote unquote, because everybody's unique. We get that. But then how do we get into symptom, and how do we kind of have that relationship in terms of being helpful?
Yeah, perfect. So you brought up a great point, is that the body can heal. And it's constantly throwing up signals. Like I liken symptoms to the check engine light on your dashboard, or the wiper fluid, refill light that pops on when your wiper fluid's low. So these symptoms, your body is always trying to communicate to you. It's really the language of your body. And it's not because your body's working against you. Your body is always working for your good. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these symptoms that we're experiencing are actually protective. So if we start to approach our body in that manner of being like, what does this mean? I'm not broken, but I could use some repair. I could use some attention. So in terms of the menstrual cycle, what we see all the time, and like we have normalized this so much that we just like expect to be moody and crampy and bloated and grumpy around the onset of our cycle every month. And that's not the case. we are not supposed to have these horrific, debilitating, life disrupting cycles 13 times a year. That's just not normal.
Yeah.
It's common because the way that we're living in Western society is not close to nature at all. We're far too exposed to blue light, which is very damaging to our mitochondria. Mitochondria, as most of us remember from biology class in high school, is the powerhouse of the cell. That's where we produce most of our cellular energy from. So if our cells are sluggish, pretty much our whole body is going to be running on airplane mode. Like, you know how you turn your phone on airplane mode to conserve battery? That's pretty much what our bodies are doing when our mitochondria are dysfunctioning. So that basic thing that we're exposed to right now, the screen that I'm looking at right now, our phones, the TVs that we're watching too late at night, these small things have a huge compound effect that start to manifest as symptoms. So moving into perimenopause, which all of us go through, most of us go through, symptoms that are super common are things like what we experience going into puberty. So perimenopause, often called the second puberty, where we are actually exiting reproductive years, where puberty is where we were entering reproductive years. So it's not meant to be like fear-based at all, but there's meant to be change happening. And so when that does happen, we need to start embrace these changes. What's common is early on, we start to see heavier flows because progesterone starts to drop first. Progesterone production is progesterone is the progestation hormone. It's what allows us to implant an embryo and have a successful pregnancy. Later in life or later in the reproductive years, we don't need that as much anymore. So that's the first thing that starts to dip. Then we get a discrepancy between how much estrogen and progesterone we have. And that can lead to those long, heavy bleeding menstrual cycles, mood swings, night sweats, irritability. And that can be common, but on the extreme end of things, that's not true. Like, there are so many things that we can do to help mitigate those kinds of symptoms, so they're not so life disrupting. In other cultures, in Eastern cultures specifically, they don't even have a word for menopause because it's not supposed to be difficult. It's just supposed to be another life transition that happens just like puberty. But again, like the way we're living in Western society, and especially in athletes, because we push ourselves so hard and don't allow much time for rest and recovery, which is truly what we need when we're going through this time, we have these really disruptive transitions.
It's so I love it how you really shared in a slightly different way exactly what like this time of life is and how do we need to think about. So some of the questions that I really specifically wanted to get into then is that how do we manage and nourish our body and consider this training, this idea of training in these 4 phases of our cycle. Like let's speak first to the female athletes that are right, like still getting a cycle, and we can move beyond into the beyond or perimenopause after that, because it has to have a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really individual.
Yeah.
So that's what I want everybody to take away from. I can give my best recommendation here, but really you need to figure out what's going to be what's best for you, and working with somebody who is well-versed on what your body is doing through testing and symptom analysis and what your goals are. So an endurance athlete, their training regimen and needs and nutrition are going to look a lot different than a power athlete. So that being said, that caveat being said, and before I go into what training and nourishing around a cycle looks like, is that knowing what your cycle is really important. But also, if you're on any kind of hormonal contraceptives, this is not going to matter for you because your body is not cycling. You are not, you're basically in a pill-induced menopause when you are on any kind of hormonal contraceptive. So that's the case, this isn't really going to hold much weight for you as far as applying this to your training. So first things first is understanding where the cycle is. We're going to have 4 different phases that are characterized by the types of hormonal balance at that time. So first phase is the menstrual phase. That's cycle day 1 is your first day of heavy bleeding. It's not really any spotting leading up to it. Day 1 is that first heavy day. So that's when our hormones are at their lowest. Our hormones drop, they really plummet, and that's when the uterus lining starts to shed. So naturally, our energy is going to be low. We don't have a whole lot of circulating estrogen. We don't have a whole lot of circulating progesterone. And those hormones really give us a lot of energy and can help push us through harder, more intense exercises. So right around your period, right around the onset of your cycle, you're not going to want to push yourself very hard. So this is where tracking your cycle is important and syncing it with your training regimen. So you can be like, okay, that's when I'm going to schedule in my rest period. This is when I'm like, when you are menstruating, sleep is an exercise. So really calm down, focus on your breathing. This is a great time for mobility work and yoga and Tai Chi and things like really centering yourself and getting yourself geared up for that next phase, which is the follicular phase. So that's when our hormones start to rise back up. Estrogen starts to rise, get us ready for ovulation. So at this point in your cycle, this is where you can really start to hit it hard. Once those hormones start to rise and you start to feel superhuman again, this is where the high intensity training can come back in. So, and this is really the best time for any kind of endurance training, heavier, longer, slower distance too, because estrogen helps us sensitize ourselves to insulin. So we can actually tolerate more carbs at this time. So not only are you able to tolerate better exercise, you're also able to use nutrients in a different way that you can't necessarily do in other parts of your cycle as well. Mm-hmm. So then we get to ovulation. So ovulation is when estrogen dips, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormones stimulate the release of the follicle. And this is really different. This is what I've noticed in my clients. This is really individual. Some women feel like they are Wonder Woman at this time. Other women feel like they need to kind of retreat and not do as much and kind of take things easier. So really figure out what's best for you at this time. Like personally, for me, I like, this is when I can hit my PRs because I feel supercharged. Yeah. But this is the time again where you can also ramp up your training, start to taper down the endurance and increase more of the strength training going into the luteal phase, the 4th phase, where progesterone should be dominant. Now, it's very, very common again in Western world, especially in higher level athletes who are training all the time to not produce as much progesterone or even to not even ovulate at all or produce any progesterone at all. Mm-hmm. So we can have higher levels of estrogen. Traditionally, in a healthy cycle, progesterone should be higher. This is when we shift away from using carbohydrates as fuel and using more protein, more fat, and really making sure that we're building up our energy stores for the menstrual cycle to start again.
Is that why you're suggesting, because this is going to be fascinating, and I know I'm going to get a lot of comments on this, that in some of the research and some sports physiologists that are in the female, realm of how should we train according to our cycle would suggest mm-hmm. that you get your period, you're at that because the hormones are at their very lowest, it's the perfect time to hit it hard. Like, don't let your period be a reason not to go forward. And then, those first 2 weeks, and then to go after ovulation into more endurance. So I want to just come back to this because I know I'm going to have listeners go, yeah, but that's not what we heard. And I want to come back to what you said at the very beginning, is that this is really individual and everybody is going to experience their cycle really differently. And what I love about what you're saying is that you're bringing in people that don't resonate with the hit it hard on day 1 of your period, because not everybody feels that way. And you're giving another way and looking at, but this is what your hormones are doing. Yes, everybody's consistent. We're all saying your hormones are low. Okay, great. Now, if your hormones are really low, yeah, it might permit you to also hit it hard. But as your hormones are increasing, you also get your energy. So I need to reiterate that in a different understanding for people to say, oh, so where do I fit? Now, one thing I'm interested in, my specific question, now that I've done all that, is you ovulate, and you mentioned it's a good time to get into strength. In my mind, my question is, okay, but progesterone is going up, and isn't progesterone more inflammatory, whereas estrogen are helping us gain muscle? So how is that? How are you thinking about that in a different way?
Sure. So I guess I should say going away from endurance training in the
Right.
second half and
Yeah.
focusing. Yes, progesterone can be more inflammatory, but there is a way to strength train that is not pro-inflammatory, like taking
Right.
longer rest breaks,
Okay.
at least 2 to 3 minutes between your sets.
Yeah.
That can really challenge the muscle tissue and use your stress hormones
Yeah.
to a benefit. So you said something.
So the estrogen isn't as high, so we're
Right.
not able to build as much muscle at that point. But I think what's interesting is like, and what a question I would have for you is, our estrogen, in the first half of our cycle, if we divide it into two, with ovulation being in the middle, it comes up, 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 and then it comes down, and then, but it also has another build. There's still estrogen in that second phase of the cycle, and I think most people don't really think about that. So we still can, and with what you're bringing to light is it still a time to strength? Like, it's still, that is a possibility for you. It's not just like all endurance or whatever. This is a time for us to keep building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yes, and so another thing that I do want to point out is the role of insulin.
Yes.
So yes, estrogen and progesterone are really important to consider in our cycle, but insulin sensitivity is another huge player in muscle development and training. So insulin sensitivity is higher in the first half of the cycle and lower in the second half of the cycle. So that's where strength training and really using our muscle fibers in a different way can help promote insulin sensitivity when we're prone to it being lower. So that's why I was like, carbs really, that's really the best part, to have them is in the first half of the cycle. So we're utilizing our body's natural ability to use those carbohydrates better for longer, more intense duration of exercise.
Right.
And then move into that second half of the cycle where insulin sensitivity lowers. And then using whatever our individual hormone balances, or training towards our goals too. Like, yes, we can consider all these hormone specific, very individual things. Right. Yeah, there's so much we can consider, and when it comes down to it, life is not perfect. So keep moving forward, but always come back to listening to your body. Like, if your coach is telling you that you need to move through your period even though you don't feel like it and you need to rest, please rest. Like, you are doing yourself a disservice if you're pushing yourself through that fatigue, because your body is asking you to take a break, like really calm down, come back to yourself, regenerate, so you can then, it's like pulling the tension in a bow so you can really push yourself forward into that next phase when your hormones do start to rise.
Yeah. Okay. That's super interesting. The one more question I have for you on that then is, when we come into that third phase, into that endurance phase or not endurance phase and strength phase, depending on the angle that you're taking, is that not more of a, like, if we're doing endurance exercise, is that not more of a fat burning? I mean, what I mean that is that we're not trying to hit those intensities. So our desire to create more, need the insulin sensitivity is a little bit less if we're doing that lower aerobic work in complement to the strength work, or not. How do you think about that?
What's your question?
So my question is it's again coming to, like, this is it's really fascinating. And I think that it's great because we're having two different ways of thinking about our cycle and how we train in our cycle. So you mentioned ovulate, do strength, lower the endurance. In another camp, it talks about ovulate, go into endurance because we're doing more fat, like we don't have access to the same sort of insulin sensitivity. And so I'm wondering in your thinking, is it more about the intensity of the endurance or the length? Because the length, as we go longer and longer and longer, you are absolutely needing more carbohydrates, because it's not just all about burning fat the whole time. We always need carbohydrates to fuel our exercise. So I'm trying to understand more specifically how we are thinking about that.
Yes. So it absolutely has to do with the duration.
Okay.
So, I'm not a proponent of the long, slow distance training, period. I don't think that's healthy for women. We were not designed to do that. Historically, or as by design, we were meant to be the gatherers in the village, taking care of children, raising children, not really doing a whole lot. Focused on strength, really, is like carrying the kids around, carrying baskets around, like that was our build. Some of the hardest clients that I work with are the long, slow distance athletes, because of what it does to our circadian rhythm and our nervous system. It pushes us into a higher cortisolic state for longer, and it's really hard to really override that when you're pushing yourself in that kind of way all the time. So in terms of this kind of training, or what I would consider any kind of ideal training outside of the marathon athlete, is the distance or the duration. So that long, slow distance is really, really hard on us. And those are, I mentioned before, those are the women that we see that are just not ovulating. They're having anovulatory cycles. So you can still bleed, but not ovulate. So,
right. And ovulation brings our progesterone, which we absolutely want. And it's, Okay, I really want to thank you, because I think this is an absolutely brilliant conversation. I know it's been hard and maybe a little bit hard to follow us. So let me just summarize, because what you've said to us, Dr. Morgan, is like, when it comes into training, so we started this conversation talking about symptoms, understanding where your body is, how to be healthful. This is what you do. This is what you bring people in a state of, almost disease, of like, maybe they're not totally in a chronic condition, but they are coming to you in that cycle of depletion. And when we come into our training, I think that what you're saying here, and what we really need to understand, is that we need to say what's going to be our best health. What are our best healthful choices? Is our body suffering in a way that might not warrant the long, slow distances? And can we get jazzed? Can we get motivated? Can we create different goals and ideas around what sport means to us if we are in those states, to help our bodies? And I see this with a lot of clients. We, want to address the weight gain. We want to address the thought, we're not sleeping, we're having hot flashes, we're really suffering, we're going into all these states, but yet we're not willing to understand that there's an interconnection here.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening, who's like a really passionate hardcore runner or cyclist or whatever, I'm not discouraging you from doing that at all, but there can be a price to pay for doing these kinds of things over and over again. And what I'm just encouraging everyone to do is listen to your body. If it is throwing up those signs on your dashboard, if it is giving you all these symptoms, like really reconsider the kind of exercise you're doing and when you're doing it, and how you can maybe optimize or change your training to still do those things, but do them at a different time, do them in a different way, duration, intensity, that are not going to push your body, because your body doesn't care what time you got for your run. Your body doesn't care what medal you won. It doesn't care about the races that are coming up. It cares that you're healthy. So that's really what I want to drive home and encourage everyone to know, is that your body is constantly talking to you, and it's up to you to listen to it and change your habits and change your mindset around the things that you're doing every day that are contributing to the signs and symptoms that it's giving you.
Yeah, it is so brilliant. I think that it's so important that we understand there's not just one way of doing this. And that's, the message I want to really bring forward, and that you have brought into light, is there's not one way.
Yeah.
And if you, like you just said, I don't need to repeat it, but if you want to keep running really long ultra marathons, whatever it is, we have to be creative. We have to be creative in how we do these things. And you've brought into light a different way. Don't do it maybe in your third week. Maybe that's not working for you. If your body is suffering, if you're really experiencing some of these symptoms, look for a different way. Work with coaches that, either know the questions to ask or know where to direct people to, get the support that you need in your body, like Dr. Morgan in terms of functional medicine. Myself, I have got a whole gamut of knowledge, knowing how do we actually move our training schedules so we can work with the body. And it's never one way. Okay. Super powerful. I hope that I think it's really neat, because we didn't get into this. We don't get into this. We don't get into the other ways of thinking. And I love it that you've brought us and pushed us to think about it. So I thank you. Okay. I have some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Ready?
Okay. So give us one moment of courage.
One moment of courage. I think the most powerful thing that anyone can do is have the courage to surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Surrender to your body, surrender to the greater plan. The most powerful things that have shifted for me in my life was when I had the courage to let go and watch what life had to unfold for me, as opposed to what I thought was best.
Well, isn't that relevant in our discussion? Right? Look at your symptoms, surrender, and then think, how can I do it? Where is the opening for me to be in my bliss still, but in a different way? Right. What is one thing you're curious about right now?
A lot. And to refrain from any kind of political discourse. What am I curious about as far? I don't know. I've been doing a lot of research about.
Yeah, what is getting?
I mean, the state of the world currently, and the decisions that people are being either forced to make or coerced. Those are everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So just trying to help people make the decisions that are right from them based off the information that we have presently, which is not an easy thing to do. Yeah. So again, that's where the surrender comes in. Knowing that we don't have all the information. So there's just an endless curiosity there, but
navigating the time that we're in, and how do you do it in a way that, for you and your business is to do it in a healthful way and to remain
and encouraging and empowering, because I think that that's what is the scariest part, is because so many of us feel so powerless. So trying to educate and inform in a way that's really empowering to people.
Yeah. What is one thing you're grateful for right now?
Oh, I am just really grateful for my husband. We just got married in May, and he's off on his first work trip today, and I'm already missing him. And so I'm just incredibly, incredibly grateful for him. And I mean, what's not to be grateful for? I'm healthy. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm breathing. In a mostly wonderful country. We could be in worse places. So yeah. just all around grateful.
We are so blessed here. I know I am too. So thank you so much. Is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners that we haven't got into and that you would like to bring forward to them?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can sit here and talk pretty much all day, but if you're not already sleeping well, focus on your sleep. Like above all else, your training gains, your injury prevention, your nutrient metabolism, like everything. There's not a part of your body that sleep does not touch. So much of us focus on the training and nutrition part, but really respect and prioritize your sleep. It'll do wonders for everything, especially in the perimenopausal realm.
Oh, I love it that you've just highlighted that, because we have a sleep expert in this masterclass.
Oh, nice.
So yes, I'm so excited to bring that conversation forward. So thank you so much, Dr. Morgan. I know that it's been a conversation that we've kind of really got into stuff, and it's not an easy one as we sort through it, but it isn't easy. So thank you for giving your time and yourself and to sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Take care.